Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight for our second webinar in the City of San Jose's Home Electrification webinar series. So during this webinar, we're going to cover information on available incentives and rebates for electrifying your home. And before I pass it over to Sean, our presenter, my name is Hannah Greenberg, and I'm an Associate Environmental Services Specialist on the City of San Jose's Climate Smart team. And just some brief background on Climate Smart for those that are not familiar. Climate Smart San Jose is the City of San Jose's climate action framework and was passed in 2018. Climate Smart outlines the strategies for the city to address climate change and create a healthier living environment. The city recently set even more ambitious targets for achieving net zero emissions by establishing what we've called the pathway to carbon neutrality by 2030. And this means that by 2030, the city hopes to sequester or remove as many emissions as it produces. And one strategy that will help us to achieve these goals is to switch from gas to electric in our homes. So we've partnered with electrification expert Sean Armstrong of Redwood Energy to put on this series of 5 webinars. And Sean will talk a little bit more about his work and some background on him in just a few moments. But first, I wanted to go over some housekeeping. 1 second. So because this is a Zoom webinar, the chat has been disabled, but there is a Q&A function. You can see it if you're on your computer. It should be at the bottom of your screen. It's a Q&A with 2 little bubbles. So you're free to use that as much as you'd like to submit questions or comments, and we can type answers there as well to your questions. Also, a reminder that this webinar is recorded. I believe you should have received a disclaimer when you entered the webinar, but just wanted to throw that out there. And you can also raise your hand if you'd like to ask questions. Sean is happy to take questions throughout the webinar, so you don't have to wait until the end for the Q&A portion. And yeah, I can help him call on people to answer questions. And I think that is it on my end. So Sean, I will pass the mic over to you. Awesome.
Well, thank you, Hannah, for the introduction. And as promised, I'll do one of those slides where I'm like, hey, it's nice to meet you. Some of you I think I've met before. I was just looking through the list of folks. And so thank you all. Welcome. So hi, since 2005, I've been working in building electrification. I started actually as a college student back in 1995 at Humboldt State University, now Cal Poly Humboldt. So it was my undergraduate degree to study how to get renewable energy into buildings. And then it was my first career as an affordable housing project manager. There were nice financial incentives, like rebates and tax credits, and I'm going to talk about tonight. And I became expert in those and figured out how they actually strongly incentivize all electric 100% solar powered construction. So then I spent like half a year at the redevelopment agency in Arcata working to develop a homeless housing shelter, which got built. So it's it's an apartment complex really. And then since 2011, I have been leading with my partner, Michael, a company. Now I have like 12 staff, something like that. But we've been just pushing on this all electric, 100% solar powered affordable housing, which we've done all over the country now. It's been a great delight in my life to have, both like a passion for environmentalism and also a successful way to do it. So with that, I'm going to go into financial. I'm going to kind of show you the stuff, the secret sauce to making things work out. Like a whole bunch.
John.
Yes.
You went out audio-wise for a second.
Oh, sorry.
At the start of the slide.
At the start of the slide. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me know if that happens. It's Molokai, so it's kind of a fragile internet connection, perhaps. Well, anyway, so it's regional incentives, and there's state incentives, and there's federal incentives. So I'm going to go through tiers of this. At the regional level, there's BayREN, the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. There's the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, PG&E's Golden State Rebates. PG&E is really focusing on electrification as of late. San Jose Clean Energy, which is this energy aggregator of sorts, and then California Energy Smart Homes. And those are all just regional. Now you have state money. Cal EVIP, which is going to be for EVs, electric vehicles. The self-generation incentive, that's for batteries. Build incentives, which are for new construction of low-income housing, essentially. And same with tech, but it's for retrofits. And there is some money in both those programs for market rate. And then federal incentives. The Inflation Reduction Act is a big deal. Even though it wasn't what perhaps we thought we were going to get through those almost 2 years of negotiations, it's a big deal. So there's the 25C energy efficiency home improvement residential tax credit. So it's tax credits to fix up your home. And then there are rebates, and rebates and tax credits are different. A tax credit is when you're paying your taxes, you have a credit. And when you have a rebate, and the HERA rebates there, the high efficiency electric home rebate program, those are point of sale rebates. So the contractor, like your furnace contractor, your home space heating system contractor, they get the rebate and it shows up on your receipt. And they show you that they took the rebate and it discounted your price. And then the homes rebate program, which I'll show you in a moment here. The HERA one is the big ticket. So I'm going to show you 3 different examples of home types. I'm going to go through this so you can get a sense of just how the incentives are. There's some incentives that work better for some kinds of houses or some situations. So I just want to give you different example homes. A mobile home, an older single family home that needs to have envelope repair as opposed to not. And then multifamily low income housing. So starting with the mobile home. Now let's pretend that this is an ADU, like there's someone's house that's next to this. And this mobile home, like when I moved into my farmhouse, there was a mobile home that was next to it. We eventually tore it down. And mobile home is a term of art. The right word perhaps would be manufactured home, which starts like in 1982 or so. And before that, they were truly mobile homes as opposed to manufactured homes on wheels. Nonetheless, for this conversation, it's not important. So this house is built in 1991, so it's insulated. 2-bed, 2-bath, it got 3 people, 1,000 square feet. It's got gassed everything, water heater, furnace, range, dryer, but it's located in a disadvantaged community. And we're going to show you the mapping tool for that because many of you may live in a disadvantaged community. And then the homeowners here, the people who own this manufactured house, they make less than 80% of the median income. Median is not the average. Median is there's 50 people above and 50 people below. It's the exact middle point in of the total number of incomes out there. So it's the middle number, and it's the averages means you average in these really amazingly high incomes that some people have, and they pull the average up. So median is the way that you look at it generally for programs to get rid of that outlier effect of really high incomes. And that means more people qualify. All right. So these are the things that we're going to propose to change. We're going to put in a really nice variable speed heat pump. This one is an AC, but there's a whole bunch of them. And this is for ductwork. That fan coil box that sits underneath the house. All those mobile homes have a furnace that's underneath, and then they duct to different parts of the house from the floor. And then there's a heat pump water heater, a nice induction stove, but it could be also a radiant top, smooth glass top. Radiant stoves are great. They're not the crumminess of an electric resistance coil, but they're not as good as induction. And then we have a Whirlpool ventless heat pump dryer. So it's energy efficient dryer, uses 1/2 to 1/3 as much electricity as a standard electric resistance dryer. So looking through this program, the programs that are available, we're just going to note here that it is doing whole home. The whole house is going to get electrified, not piecemeal. We're going to do it all at once. And we need to do some new rewiring because we've got 2 different devices here, the stove and the dryer, that need a 240 volt circuit that isn't there. we wouldn't have to do this. This is an example, right? We have decided to get a 240-volt stove and a 240-volt dryer in that circumstance, which is a fairly common choice. But we don't need to do any envelope like the walls, the roof, and we're not going to do EV charging in this circumstance. There's a garage nearby. So we're going to do California Energy Smart Homes. So this program from PG&E and San Diego Gas and Electric, SoCal Edison, they say, hey, you have to do, the existing single family property owner must convert all the gas appliances and equipment to advanced electric systems, like a good quality heat pump for HVAC and the water heater you saw, and induction cooking, which I mentioned there. And then the dryer, you can get electric resistance, but there's a bonus if you get a heat pump dryer. So we assumed, yeah, we're going to get a heat pump dryer. We'll go for the bonus. So just thoroughly explore this for you. And some electrical infrastructure upgrades. And note it says that's not required, but bonus incentives are available. All right, well, maybe it's worth it then, because we can get a nice induction stove or a glass top radiant. The option would be to get a countertop, 120 volt, 2-burner only, induction ranges, and you can get a couple of those. You get a countertop oven, but those wouldn't qualify for the electrical infrastructure upgrade rebates. And it's a different quality of experience. So I mentioned this was an ADU. Note the incentives here that there's for a single family and a duplex and a townhome for alterations. You see the money there and how it depreciates over time. They're trying to shape the market by dumping money in right now, make it go. So that's why the money is front loaded. And you see there's a single family duplex townhome heat pump dryer bonus. I don't know why they had to abbreviate to HP. There's plenty of room there. Electrical infrastructure upgrade bonus, $1,000, you see? Now down below, if it's an ADU, a smaller house next to a bigger house, there's less money. I don't know why, honestly, because the systems are almost the same cost. And in some ways, I feel like this is a little regressive. But here it is, $3,500 for the whole building electrification. There's the $400 bonus for the heat pump dryer and a $600 infrastructure upgrade rebate instead of $1,000. Now, the program, it doesn't work with other CPUC funded incentives. The California Public Utilities Commission, they regulate the public utilities, the ones like PG&E, which is the program administrator here, PG&E and SoCal Edison. So the CPUC also administers build and SGIP, which is the battery one, and I mentioned tech. And they're like, nah, you can only dip from this well once. But San Jose Clean Energy is not a CPUC big public utility. It's like a municipal utility that has some of the functions of a larger utility. It buys and sells electricity on behalf of all the San Jose residents so that you guys get the cleanest energy of all. You get 100% renewable energy, which PG&E has only just recently started offering. Okay, around the state.
Don, you're a little muffled.
A little muffled?
Going in and out. Yeah, now it's good.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No
So
worries.
upshot of it is that you can get more rebates from San Jose Clean Energy, and I'm going to show you those in a sec. And note that it says must meet the minimum alteration requirements to have access to the funds. Just to go back, there's details here about like the efficiency. If on here, you see on the far left, it says a mini split heat pump or residential central heat pump, SEER 15 or greater. And SEER 15, the least efficient you could get would be SEER 14. Anything lower than that's not legal to sell. So it's just a tiny bit more efficient that they're encouraging. All of these here are actually not the highest efficiency stuff that's available at all. Like SEER 42 is the best air conditioner heat pump out there. And they're just incentivizing SEER 15. So that is to say, this is a low bar for entry. They're trying to make it easy for anyone to come in and electrify their house.
Sean, we have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I think this is in regard to the program we were just covering, but what is the time frame for completion of this? A calendar year? Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head, but the calendar year is the standard for almost all the programs where I've seen them talk about it. So I think that's the right assumption, but I don't have that off. I don't know that for sure. It's like a 90%. A year is what pretty much everyone seems to work with. Okay, so San Jose, oopsie, here we go. This is an example of San Jose's funding. You can have some gummy bears though. Sorry, my daughter wanted some chocolate. So San Jose Home Appliance Savings Program saves on the cost of new Energy Star certified appliances, which is a higher bar. Energy Star is the top 25% efficiency performing products. They set thresholds for getting in that are higher than what you just saw for the other program. So that's fine. You just know you have to go to a higher goal if you want to get into the San Jose Clean Energy. Encourages more efficiency, great. So then you got to be a San Jose Clean Energy customer, of course, live in a single family home, so it's not for multifamily, live in a qualifying area or meet income guidelines. So qualifying area and income guidelines. Just note here though, like if you're going to get the heat pump, Whirlpool front load washer, dryers, these are just a variety of appliances, some that are electrified and some, like a washing machine gets water and uses electricity, and the water can be heated with gas or electricity. But look, they're giving incentives for a clothes washer, which is not a decarbonization choice, but it's an energy efficiency measure. So program price, they say $346 at the end if it was retail. So they're giving discounts and rebates. Great. But note here that there's two qualifying thresholds for the San Jose Clean Energy. One is that you're in a DAC. A DAC is a disadvantaged community, which is, there's a variety of ways in which they get qualified, but generally people who live in geographic areas that were redlined, meaning these were areas in which you could not get banking services because you were people of color. And there was generally sundown town restrictions in other areas where policing would prevent people from moving out of communities. And there were restrictions all around in neighboring communities on who could buy and sell to keep people of color out. So like my grandparents up near Seattle, they had a deed restriction that prevented a whole list of people of color from buying that house, hypothetically, if it'd still been enforced. So with that and many more overlapping issues, as well as a large amount of air pollution, because air pollution is frequently dumped into communities of color, water pollution, et cetera. So what you're seeing here is a subset, this map on the top. In red, these are areas that are mapped disadvantaged communities. And you can see the incomes down below. There's also income thresholds. So if you have a one-person household, you would make at minimum $27,000 and max $54,000 to qualify. Let's say that you have like an average household, 3 people, $46,000 at a minimum, $92,000 at a maximum. So that's how you know if you qualify. You're in a certain area that's colored red, and you qualify via income. So you could live in an area red and be a high income person and wouldn't necessarily qualify. Now, still working on this same house, because there's a whole bunch of different incentives that you can layer together. The Inflation Reduction Act. So we were going through those measures, like we're going to go after the water heater and the space heating system. Well, on the left-hand side, it says, you can do a 30% tax credit for 2023. If you were doing this work this year, over the course of the year, and you were submitting for incentives and such, you could get $2,000 for the heat pump, either the water heater or the space heating system, because at the end, they're not giving you more than $3,200 on the left-hand side. And $1,200 for weatherization, if you were to do that, or panel upgrades, a little bit of wiring work. Okay, and you can get $3,200 year after year if you do this in stages. Like this year, I'm going to do the space heating system. Next year, I'm doing the water heater. You might not all fit in some of the other incentives that are requiring whole house, but I do want you to know that that 30% tax credit allows you to take it year over year, year after year, I should say. Then on the right-hand side, these are really good rebates. but we do not have them yet. They're being not held up, but they're being developed at the Department of Energy. And then the state of California has to submit responding to the request for proposal, the RFP. And then we get to set up our program. And the state of California has hired like 200 new staff, like adding almost 50% more people to the Energy Commission. So it's, it's close to 300 new staff. Remember, they're going from 600 to 900 people just to manage all the different Inflation Reduction Act monies that are coming through. So on the right-hand side, let's say that you made somewhere between, up to 150% of the area median income I mentioned before. I don't recall what the area median income is in San Jose. I apologize, not recall. I didn't look it up. That's my bad here. But when the program gets unveiled, they will have in every city, every like census zone, essentially, they'll have a different median income. And there are really different median incomes potentially in different parts of San Jose. So that complexity is why it's taking so long. But the goal was to make sure that the money went to people who were, they got 100% of the incentives you're seeing here, like $8,000 if you're making less than 80% of the area median income. And instead of 8,000, it's 4,000 if you're making between 80% of AMI and 150% of AMI. So there's two tiers. First tier is $8,000, but it's 50% off if you are wealthier, is the idea. So you can go down. $8,000 for the heat pump for HVAC system, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning is what HVAC combined stands for. So the HVAC system, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, $8,000. $4,000 for panel upgrades, $2,500 for more wiring, like we talked about doing some wiring in this. $1,750 for the heat pump water heater, $1,600 for installation, $840 for an electric resistance like glass top or induction stove. That's nice. But you have to get a heat pump dryer in order to get the next $840. Electric resistance, condensing, those don't cut it. You have to get a heat pump.
So right. Really quick, because I looked it up for you. It looks like in
you.
San Jose, yeah, no problem. The median household income is about 125,000, and per capita is different, but yeah, I think it's 125,000.
So if you were up to 80% of the AMI, that would kind of look like up to $105,000 of annual income. Say, do you have the household size? Let's call it 3 people because that's an household size. Roughly. Yeah. So if you're making up to $105,000, and you'd get, for a 3-person household, you would get $8,000. And if you were making above $105,000, and if it was 125, another 50%, 75, so between $105,000 and $200,000 roughly is the 80% up to 150% AMI. Is that right? No, 50. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so you're up to $200,000, essentially you qualify for this program in San Jose if you're making up to $200,000 roughly for your household. That means a lot of people qualify. Okay, so now we'll look at an older house in San Jose, not an ADU, not a little one, but a larger house. Different programs have some different implications. So it's built in 1969, it's 4-bed, 2-bath, 5 people live in it. It's got the gas water heater, gas space heating system, stove, and dryer. Doesn't have a solar array. Doesn't yet have EV charging capabilities. And those are also, like I mentioned, programs that have rebates that are part of decarbonizing, getting rid of fossil fuels. And it happens to have kind of like an old crummy envelope. It's really leaky. Some of the insulation isn't there in the attic anymore. It's like it needs a little bit of help. Now would be a good time. So the things we're going to propose doing is, we'll put in a ducted inverter drive heat pump, decent heat pump. An inverter is a computer, and inverter drive, and also called, I'm blanking for a second, a little cold climate heat pump that has a computer in it, also an inverter. Inverter drive, that's the same thing. Variable drive, same thing. They're all different words to describe the fact that it's a computer inside of it, which is new since 2009, to have small computers and heat pumps to make them work way more efficiently and also make them work below freezing, where they can accelerate the functions. So it's really great to get an inverter drive heat pump slash variable drive heat pump slash cold climate heat pump, all the same thing. All right, we're gonna put in a water heater, 80-gallon water heater, bigger, they pretty much go up to 80 gallons. And that's lots of hot water. We've done huge field studies and we've found that only 7-person households can run out of hot water with an 80-gallon tank. And if that only happens basically on a Saturday when everyone takes a shower, one after another, then eventually the water heater is like, whoa, that's a lot of showers. And then you have to wait like 15 minutes, basically, is what it comes down to. Wait 15 minutes, then take a shower. So you got a nice LG stove, LG, very popular brand for appliances. Get a Whirlpool heat pump dryer. But we're also going to put in an EV charger, some solar panels up on the roof, and we're going to do some insulation, do a little tightening up, put some caulk around. So first out of the gate, because this is a single family home and it needs envelope upgrades and also comprehensive appliance retrofit, we're going to look at the Ren Regional Incentives. Ren, different. They'll give you up to $1,000 back on HVAC heat pump installations. That's pretty much what you can get out of this deal. And note that they have a 17 SEER as the minimum threshold. Now, 17 SEER is not an inverter or variable drive or cold climate heat pump. That starts at 19 approximately is when a computer enters. This is what you call a 2-stage heat pump. Just like if you had a single gear bicycle, that's 1 stage. If you have 2 gears, you can go like low or high on your bicycle when you're pedaling. That's a 2-stage heat pump. But a computer means that you've got like 32 speeds. You got one of those things that can go up a mountain and go down a long flat plane, and you're always sort of pedaling at the same speed. That's what the computer does, is keep the thing working right where its sweet spot is. And note there's $100 bonus for downsizing. So downsizing can happen when you get a computer drive heat pump, variable inverter, cold climate heat pump. And they're saying if you, instead of getting a 2-stage or a 1-stage, get a variable drive, so you go from a 4-ton system, or I see this all the time, going from a 5-ton to a 3-ton. That's a classic what you do when you have a computer in it, because the computer produces so much heat, not the computer, but the controls produce so much more heat when it gets cold that you don't have to have 5 tons that becomes like a 2-ton heat pump when it's cold because there's no computer in it. Instead, it's a 3-ton heat pump that's always doing 3 tons of work. Even when it's 0 degrees out, it's still doing that work. So they're saying if you get a good heat pump, or if you put in a lot of insulation into your house, or both, you get $100 bonus. The goal is to get a smaller heat pump, which reduces the stress on the grid, less power demand. And they'll give you $500 if you do combining insulation like we're talking about with the system. And this combustion appliance safety test app, this is only if you're leaving gas still in there. And our goal is to get rid of all the gas. But if you make the mistake of leaving gas in your house, this program wants to make sure that it's safe. So like if you're going to replace the next gas thing next year and the gas the following year, which is super common. I don't mean to tease anyone. That's how I did it. That's how most people do it. If that's what you need to do, they are going to want to have you test these gas appliances that are being left in place because they're dangerous. And then a smart thermostat. That's basically they want to be able to control your air conditioning during the summer and turn it down a little bit if the grid is getting stressed so that everyone would have to have a blackout. So reasonable. It kept us from having a blackout twice last summer in the Bay Area specifically. Okay, and so these are the envelope rebates. Air sealing is where you caulk. You go around with caulk. We'll give you $150 to get a caulk gun out and caulk the windows, caulk around any cracks the door. And then insulation. That's the Pink Panther. They got attic insulation, wall insulation, attic and wall insulation, heating and cooling and insulation combined. Choose your own adventure. And then duct sealing. The duct work is the usually flexible metal, kind of looks like slinky stuff, or it's sheet metal that's a sort of rectangular boxes, but it delivers the hot or cold air around your house if you have a ducted system. So they give you some money for duct sealing, which since ducts are frequently 50% leaky, so if they're up in the attic, like half the heat or cooling goes into the attic and only half gets into your rooms. So they're saying you gotta test it out to less than 10% leaky, which is very reasonable. And or duct replacement. And I encourage people to keep their ducts generally, unless they're really wrecked. But if they're not really wrecked, if a heat pump getting installed in your house costs 10 grand or 15 grand, if you do the duct work, it's another 10 grand or 15 grand or more. So duct replacement is a very significant choice to make. Duct sealing is an easy thing to do. All right, Bay Ren, still there, more money. The heat pump water heater, get $1,000. The induction range, $750. The efficiencies, they're always, but to note, the heat pump water heaters that are for sale are always essentially the highest tier, like they're tier 4 right now, and they're all that. And these programs will tell us like, oh, we want it to be a UEF of 3.3. You can't buy a heat pump water heater that's less than 3.3 right now. So you shouldn't run into any problems, is what I'm saying. All these efficiency programs are setting their standards lower than even the lowest available products. Okay, you get your induction range and then your heat pump dryer. And note the heat pump dryer has to have greater than 4.5 combined energy factor, which is a new metric that Energy Star made recently to try to capture the whole package of what this dryer and washing machine do, because there's only so many different sizes. And so anyway, it has to be Energy Star certified and actually has to be a reasonably good Energy Star heat pump dryer.
Hey, Sean.
Yes.
Can I relay a question from the chat?
Please do.
Okay. So doesn't a heat pump water heater require more space than a regular gas water heater, more open space around the heat pump?
It does not necessarily. So if the heat pumps need a door that's got louvers on it, or so like if you could put it in the exact same closet where the gas water heater is, noting that heat pump water heaters are 21 inches wide and gas water heaters are generally 21 inches wide also, but sometimes they're narrower. So you could have like a 30-gallon tank in a closet that was 18 inches wide. And if that closet was just 18 inches wide, you can't fit a heat pump water heater into it. So assuming you've got 21 inches at least, and really you'd like to have 30 inches so that a plumber can get their hands in there, but that's true for gas water heaters also. Like there's plumbing to install, not just slip a tank in. So once you got the tank in a closet, someplace, in your basement, in your garage, if it's in a tight little closet, you'd put a louvered door, so like slats on it, and you could have a louver just at the top of the door, and then have an undercut, like take 1.5 inches off the bottom of the door so air can get pulled in from the bottom and exhausted through the louver. And field tests have shown that works great. You can also undercut the door and duct the exhaust air to some other place. I recommend that people, you don't want to go farther than 6 feet, and you don't want to put a kink in the ductwork because these water heaters have kind of weak fans. They're not designed to blow air through 90-degree corners. You need a much stronger fan for that. So you end up making the system very inefficient if you put ductwork in, but it is one of the things you can do if you just do it carefully so you don't put a kink in it. You can have an undercut door and put duct in and blow it above the door, blow it into the garage. You know, you can blow it anywhere. They only run about 1 hour a day to 4 hours a day, depending upon how much they get used. And they sound kind of like a loud refrigerator or like a dryer when they're running for 1 hour. So it's best to have them in a closet or just someplace where people aren't hanging out, just in the same way like the laundry dryer gets put into a closet or it's in the garage, or just treat it like a laundry dryer in terms of its noise. It's a little bit quieter than that, but nonetheless. So hopefully that answers the question. And if you just stick it into a garage, yeah, all the air, great. But I'm just explaining, if you do have a closet, they need about 21 inches plus 6 to 8 inches for the plumber. And that's it. They need a louvered door or an undercut door with some sort of way for the air to also get out. So it gets, there you go.
We have a quick follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Just to clarify it. So this person's read that a heat pump water heater requires 1,000 cubic feet of open air around it. Is that correct or
If,
yeah.
well, it's true if you're going to, well, I guess it's not true. I mean, it's true that 1,000 square feet or cubic feet, I mean, works well. That's a garage. That's a large pantry. That's a laundry room. Yeah, that works great. But I've had them go into projects like 20,000 of them. And they almost always go into small closets, very small closets. And we do the things that I just explained. And you can see here it has a unified energy factor of 3.3 on this slide. It's saying the difference between perfect and ideal circumstances for installing these and putting it into a closet, as I described, is the difference between 3.3 and 3.1 UEF. So when they're not like the perfect circumstance, they still work almost exactly the same. They drop, like 7% efficiency. What doesn't work is putting them into an unvented closet. We did that on accident on one of the first projects we ever did back in 2014. And then we studied it because we had everything all monitored. We found that the efficiency dropped by 40%, not 7%, if they're in an unvented closet, like airtight, the door sealed with a caulk and such around it, a closed door with an itty bitty little closet. They work great in the summer because the closet's hot enough and no problems. It's in the winter they start turning into electric resistance water heaters if you do it. And that was an outside closet. If your closet was completely sealed like that inside your house, it would be a little bit less bad because your house would kind of heat the closet some. But just don't do that. Like put in a louvered door or put in an undercut door with a vent out. Do that. and then the tank works perfectly. So BayRen, note that it says the customer must not have received a rebate for the same product or equipment, but it doesn't apply to tax credits. And it also allows rebates to go on other products. So the BayRen rebates, that's an example where that's coming from the Public Utilities Commission. BayRen is essentially acting as a rebater on their behalf. And so they have rules around double dipping. But if you call it BayRen, they have staff that are specialized in doing what I'm doing with you right now, but for you personally. And they'll go through, they say, okay, here's the incentives for this program and this program and this program. And they give you that kind of loving attention that people need. And BayRen is a great organization for that. And note, they say, no more than $7,750 in rebates. Now, this is for the battery. This is a specialized one. It's for any house, of course, but it is just for single family homes. And in this case, if it's subject to a resale restriction, because SCHIP is essentially for low income folks. So resale restriction would be, you got a first time home buyer loan. You got like the county gave you a loan to help clean up the lead mitigation and a new roof. Those are deed restrictions because you have to pay them back. They have a lien essentially on your house to a degree. That's how it works in real estate. So let's be an example. And I did that. I got a program to do lead mitigation and get a new roof on my old farmhouse. And so I then personally, I got my solar array from SASH because we were low moderate income at the time. We are also farmers. I have a family farm and farms do not make money. So at the time, I was like, great, I've got a resale restriction. I'm going to get a SASH funded solar array. And SASH, it says this is an eligibility. If you have participated in SASH, as I have, then I would qualify for a battery or live in a DAC, a disadvantaged community. And SASH stands for Single Affordable Solar Homes, but essentially it's a free solar array. That's how good that incentive is if you go get SASH. But I'm just talking about the battery program here for a moment. SASH ran out of money, so there is no SASH, but folks who did qualify like myself. So if you live in a subsidized, low-income apartment, or you live in an apartment that has already participated in SOMA, which is available to market rate apartments also if they're in disadvantaged communities. SOMA is the Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing Program. So these are all eligibility thresholds. Any of these programs means you get to get a battery rebate for $250 a kilowatt hour to $850 a kilowatt hour. And you'd say, well, how much is a kilowatt hour of battery? On average in California, it's $1,300 per installed kilowatt hour of battery. A Tesla Powerwall, probably familiar with those, that has 13 kilowatt hours in it. So if you buy that battery and it's $16,000 roughly, it's 13 kilowatt hours. And then you take 13 times 250 or times 850, and that would be your incentive. Now, where would you be eligible? These are spots. In orange, you can see two public power safety shutoffs. That would make you eligible for an SGIP battery. PG&E might give you a free battery if you have a CPAP machine. They have been doing that. Basically, if you have 2 fire outages and you're on any kind of medical equipment, I don't know this program. I've just seen it over and over and over. People are getting free 1 single Tesla Powerwall battery to make sure that people can run their medical equipment at night. So I've seen that up on the Hoopla reservation locally. Then census tracts with presumed resale restrictions, not necessarily, right? But these are places where you could be eligible. You actually have to have one of those resale restrictions, but they're just mapping out where it's sort of the lower income components where these loans and income restrictions have happened. And then high fire threat districts, tiers 2 and 3. That's a lot of places around you, but it's not actually in San Jose. So you can see how different thresholds of qualification change, but there's multiple ways to qualify for it, is the point. Now, we're going to talk about electric vehicle chargers, because that's still on this list of what we're doing with this house. So on the left-hand side, you can see the chart there. They're saying, hey, there's $3.1 million right now, this is all current, of remaining funds to go get a DC fast charger in your house if you're low income. Note it says 38% of funds have been reserved or issued to disadvantaged and low income communities. A minimum of 25% will be committed to disadvantaged low income communities within this county. So they are saying some counties will get more money, but it's always a minimum of 25%. And then the blue on the level 2 chargers, which might be, gosh, 1/3 as fast as a DC fast charger, might be 40 amps versus 140. But level 2, that is way fast. Level 2 still gets your car charged within a few hours, 3 or 4 hours, as opposed to 1. So the rebates, up to $4,500 per level 2 charger, $500 for if you're in disadvantaged community residents, another $1,000 if this is an apartment, and you must verify the site for the project. You got to show them exactly where you live. They go through the whole verification process, and in this case, Cal EVIP is for Santa Clara County. So the money is there. Now, we're going to talk about the low-income apartment complex, which, to note here, could qualify for Cal EVIP and would qualify also for the SGIP. But I'm not going to mention those again. So just want you to know that those are multifamily. All right, here's a nice little project built in 2005. It's big, 543 units. It's got central gas boiler. It's gas water heater, but they're called boilers when they get bigger. Gas stoves and gas dryers. And it's in a low-income community. This is a real building. Went out and got some floor plans. Nothing important here really to see. It's just there's various sizes of apartments. This is what apartments look like. Oh, and one thing I always notice that, sorry, I'll just move on here. So then proposed changes. We're going to put in a ducted Carrier this time. Carrier is a great brand. And it's going to be an inverter drive heat pump. We're going to put in one of these 80-gallon heat pump water heaters. Oh, actually, I'll take that back. A boiler in this case, I should have typed out gas water heater, because you can see here that there's water heaters in the patios at the top. Can you see how there's a little closet with a swinging door with a circle in it? That's how architects draw water heaters. And that, by the way, is a perfect place to install a heat pump water heater. There's other perfect places. Inside the envelope is perfect too, because it has warmer air. But that's an example of how you would install a heat pump water heater. You'd put it in a little closet and you would put a vent on the door, a louver, quote unquote, either ideally at the top, put a little vent at the top, and then you'd have undercut door at the bottom. And that's about as low cost as you can do it. Buying a louvered door is more expensive than getting a solid door, undercutting the bottom of it, and putting a vent into it. FYI, as a person who works on affordable housing. But that's the cheapest way possible. So then pose changes, right? I talked about the water heater just now. Said, here's your LG stove, there's your heat pump dryer, your EV, we're gonna put solar up on the roof. So there's a whole bunch of programs that support affordable housing, so many of them. I mentioned a few that I'm not even gonna get to in this, but let's start off with California Energy Smart Homes, which has got a bunch of money. $3,500 per apartment is a bunch of money. If the work is $20,000, it doesn't pay for it. But if you were already going to do a retrofit and you're trying to decide whether or not to electrify, this is commonly done every year, all the time, right? Retrofits on existing apartments. Well, now $3,500 could change your mind because that's more than enough to pay for the additional electrification costs. And there's so many other incentives too. I'm just saying this based on experience of talking with developers. They're like, oh, $3,500 plus another $400 for the heat pump dryer and $600 if I have to do some rewiring. Hey man, we're like at $4,500 there. Now, but since this is from PG&E, it cannot be stacked with other funded incentives. This would be a good example again of why you might call it Bay Rent to be like, what's the best deal for me? Or make sure that you, well, yeah, I think that's probably the best person. I point them out is because they have staff that are specialists in these rebates, and they serve so many Bay Area cities that have different incentives because Marin Clean Energy is in the Bay Area, East Bay Community Energy, San Jose Clean Energy, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, Peninsula Clean Energy. They all have different incentives. And so Bay Rent folks are uniquely experienced, I've found, in trying to help you figure out your residence's best path, because there's a few different paths. And then on the left, you can see if they had a central heat pump water heater, there'd be $5,000 per project, and then $500 per unit served. Now that's a good deal. The $5,000 for design, great. That does pay for a design, a fair amount of it. It's probably $15,000 to $25,000 to do the heat pump design for a retrofit. But yeah, $5,000 is good money. And $500 per residence. The cost is probably in the range of $4,000 per residence to put in of any kind of water heater, like gas boiler or heat pump boiler. The costs are essentially the same. So that's the incentive. $500, maybe 10%. That's frequently what you see with incentives, is they're targeted for 10 to 25% of the cost. This is not like a secret. There's a huge industry nationwide, big conferences where they talk about how much incentives they think is just enough to get people to shift their behavior, but not spend too much of the public's money. But what's happening right now is that everyone is throwing in on electrification, and truly they're trying not to step on each other's toes within the framework of what's legal, but they're trying to stack funding so that it's not 10% or 25%, it's 50%, it's 60%. It's, for the HERO rebates that I mentioned earlier, like the $8,000 per heat pump from the Inflation Reduction Act, those ones, $8,000 is enough to do a couple different types of heat pumps. If you're really frugal, like a ductless mini split with 1 or 2 heads on it, fan coils for 2 different zones in your house, you could do that with $8,000 if you were really careful. So just note, the stacking issue, sometimes you run into that. Build for new construction of low-income housing. And here you get the incentive is awarded per bedroom. And they say, like, the average amount, that's $1,600. There are different amounts of money for low rise, mid rise, high rise, single family. So looking at these two side by side, energy smart homes versus build. If you had access to both of them, your project matched both of them. Energy smart homes would pay you less than build would. It's a deep insight. is that, and since one prohibits the other, might as well go with build. And so on my consultancy side, I do build over and over and over, and I don't bring up California Energy Smart Homes, even though the money's there, because if I can get into build, that's a better program. But build has a limited amount of money, and California Energy Smart Homes, the word is that they will never allow that to run out of money. PG&E specifically is like, we are going to fund this because PG&E is all in on electrification. And when I've talked to the program administrators, unlike build, where I know that this is like a gold rush, you have to get your applications in right away and the money's going to be gone in about 2 years. Energy Smart Homes is committed to money for longer. And that money is coming from their investors. Like, you can spend money from different pools, and PG&E is committed that one way or another, they are going to incentivize electrification because it makes profitable sense for them. Build, on the other side, is funded by the legislature, and that's more the political wins as they fly. So politically, they're putting out more incentives now. That's great. PG&E on the left-hand side is like, we're in it for business purposes and we're going to keep on doing it. They're just not putting as much money in.
Hey, Sean, really
Yes.
quickly, we have a couple questions in the chat, but since we're approaching time and I know some folks are going to have to hop off, do you want to wait to take them and just
yeah, let's see. I have, what time is it? How are we doing?
It's 6:56.
Okay, we start at 6, right?
Yes.
And are we assuming this goes to 7:30, or are we just finishing at 6?
We can totally go over, but the webinar is from 6 to 7.
Okay.
So
well,
some
then
people might hop
I'm gonna
off.
rush. I'm assuming most of you are not multifamily apartment complex developers, so I'm just going to quickly go through this to get us out on time. And so SOMA is a great program. It puts in solar panels almost for free, even free, on low-income apartment complexes and apartments in disadvantaged communities. Now, rebates for smaller projects when you're not doing the whole house. So PG&E, it does have individual incentives, like little incentives for batteries, little incentives for smart thermostats. This one is fun. If you are in a fire map for San Jose area, like this, most of the area in the mountains around you, you can get some of these incentives. Fire map. So Golden State Rebates, it's partnered with PG&E. So it really is PG&E, but Golden State Rebates, just PG&E, not SoCal Edison, et cetera. And they're just putting out money with smart thermostats and water heaters. And what they're trying to do is get the water heaters controlled by the smart thermostats. This is a thing to go after the space heating system. Pardon me, the smart thermostats for the space heating system, but they want the water heaters to also have the smart controls on them, which they can. Most of them do now. So we're trying to get smart water heaters, essentially. And you can purchase these devices. You can get them through their site at a discount for $500. So it's a point of sale rebate. Isn't that nice? Heck. So this is not comprehensive. $1,000, 2 per home. The rebate is $1,000, up to 2 per houses, 2 HVAC systems per home. They both central and mini split systems. You got to work with the tech enrolled contractor, but tech is a great program for retrofitting single family homes. Non-heat pump to heat pump installation, I mean, you have to fuel switch the gas furnace to a heat pump. That's what tech wants. And that heat pump that goes in has got to meet Title 24 standards. No problem. Title 24 standards might mean, though, you have to like run a Title 24 in your house and make sure your house currently complies with Title 24, other than some of the things like solar, but just on a building efficiency level. And this last one, heat. If you are still burning with a wood stove, they will pay you to replace it. Now, incentives for replacing freestanding wood stoves or wood burning fireplaces inserts with electric heat pumps. They're trying to get you to go to a heat pump. However, it's not open yet for the Bay Area homeowners. It's soon. But basically saying, if you're doing wood stoves, get a heat pump, folks. And that's true, because wood stoves are really dirty. I grew up with them in rural Wisconsin. They're hard. And that's it. So now I'm ready for the questions that we're stacking up there.
Yeah. So, and if folks do need to hop off, feel free to. We're going to work on posting a recorded version of this presentation, so you'll have access to it within the next few weeks. I'm not sure when yet, but if you do need to hop off, thank you so much for joining. And we can dive into the questions in the chat. So the first one is from Jeff, and it says, would it be sensible to have a heat pump water heater that could have the cool outflow air be ducted indoors when the weather is hot and outdoors when the weather is cool?
Yeah, that's a fun one. My partner does that. He has a little mud room, essentially, and he has the heat pump water heater in the mud room, and he controls that vent. Now, I wouldn't recommend it to most people because most people are bad at maintaining their homes. Not everybody, but it's a pretty common scenario. So, but yeah, that would be an efficiency move. It gives you free air conditioning in the spring, summer, and fall. It gives some free dehumidification if you have humidity issues. Works great in basements. And in the wintertime, it would cool your house a little bit. Essentially like leaving your refrigerator open for a couple of hours is about the amount of cooling that it would do to your house. So if you ever made that mistake, you'll discover that, yeah, it does actually cool your kitchen a couple degrees if you leave your refrigerator and freezer open. And that's about what heat pump water heaters do. They have almost the same size heat pump compressor inside them as a large refrigerator. So yeah, you could do that.
Okie dokie. So the next two questions, I don't know if there are concrete answers for them, but someone asked, how many homes in San Jose is it believed that these incentives will entice homeowners to electrify? And
the way the incentives are supposed to work is that they're supposed to work with early adopters and people who are on the edge of making their choices. So like early and medium adopters. And because what all these different programs are trying to do is incentivize an economic shift where people stop putting in gas systems just generally. That's going to happen in 2028 for water heaters, where you're no longer in California allowed to buy. Oh, sorry, in the Bay Area. This is essentially a ruling. 2028, you can't do anything but put in a heat pump water heater in the Bay Area. And at that point, when it's the code in 2028, they're not going to have much in the way of incentives for things that you're already required to do. So that in 2030 is when you can't put in a gas furnace, not a new one and not a retrofitted one. That's the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's rulings that they've put out there now. So in that real world that we have, the incentives are going to be rich now for early adopters. And then by 2028, everyone else just has to do it. So the goal is to get 100% electrification by 2030 to 2035, depending upon what city you're living in the Bay Area. But that's where we're at. And incentives are designed to incentivize behavior as opposed to reward things that are absolutely required. So yeah, we'll see. What I could say is that studying the numbers right now, we're seeing exponential growth of heat pumps in California, in the whole nation, as well as over in the EU. And as a global phenomenon since 2019, exponential growth curves, not just normal like flat lines, but going up. So things are changing quickly. The whole world has decided that electrification is what will address climate change, and it's also a little bit cheaper to build usually. So I see anonymous and attendee here. I'm reading these cues. You say,
yeah.
Anonymous says there was no mention of the rules recently passed by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. There we go. That mandate is starting 2027. I obviously I was anticipating your question there. Yeah, that's happening. Okay, so your question is, if I own a home in San Jose, I am now mandated to eventually retrofit my house. True. how much is San Jose going to expect any homeowner to spend of their own money to retrofit their home? I can't speak for the San Jose City Council, which is, a moving target politically. And city councils then work with the staff, right? But we know what they've put out so far. The San Jose Clean Energy, the San Jose City Utility, I was showing you that. And then the federal government's Inflation Reduction Act funds, those go through 2031. So some of the funds are outside of the city of San Jose's control. And BayRen, the people who fund some of the funds from the CPUC, so San Jose Clean Energy does also, BayRen does also, there's some overlaps, but point is that the Public Utilities Commission is going to continue collecting money from ratepayers to rebate energy efficiency. And so there will always be an energy efficiency program, but it will become an electrification program. So I think what you're going to see, if I was to just pull something out of the air, is that if you could get, say, $100 right now today for electrification, then you're going to get like $60 in 7 or 8 years. Some of the incentives from PG&E will disappear, I think. But gosh, it's hard to say. I just want to put that out there. Like, that's me speculating, because right now everyone's all in on electrification and incentivizing. But I also did show you that declining incentive from PG&E, which is a fairly good number. So things are in flux. Sorry, that's not the best answer. I'm trying to say, like, there is always going to be money in the future, but it depends on how hard people lean into electrification, incentivizing it. The next anonymous attendee asked, how much is San Jose working with PG&E to ensure that the electric grid has enough capacity to handle all of this additional electric demand? Well, San Jose buys electricity through PG&E's wires. PG&E is essentially solely responsible for the wires component of it. PG&E is heavily investing into wires, but also into things that are much cheaper than installing new wires, which is like the smart thermostats I showed you. You could build an additional 50% capacity of our infrastructure grid, or you could have devices shut down a little bit during peak moments, which can equal the impact of like 50% more grid. So I teach a different class on how to make sure that your power demand, the stuff that requires new wires, the instantaneous amount of power, which causes friction in the wires and heat if the wires aren't thick enough. So if everyone's adding more power demand, it's how you get fires and dangers, because the wires got too hot. Well, I teach this class on how to avoid increasing your power demand. And PG&E pays me to teach this class. And SMUD pays me to teach this class. And San Jose Clean Energy, Climate Smart, like, this is one of the classes I'm teaching, is just specifically how to make it so that we can keep the grid we have now, because it's expensive to upgrade grids. And it's really clear that technically we don't need to. We clearly do not need to upgrade our grid. And it's becoming more and more clear as load controllable EVs, water heaters, and space heating systems, and stoves now, stoves with batteries in them so that they don't have a large peak demand. All those things are now for sale that eliminate peaks. So the city of San Jose, to the degree that they're encouraging controllable loads like EV chargers and such, that's how we all maintain our existing grid. And I really don't think people should be trying to create a new grid. We don't have time for that. Like, it takes 10 to 15 years to create a new grid, and we need to solve climate change like now. Glaciers are melting faster than any scientist thought was going to happen now. That's in like the New York Times every day, is how things are happening faster than our worst case scenario expectations. So I have very little patience with building a new grid. We have to live with the grid we have now, love it to bits, and just use it frugally and thoughtfully with smart controls that allow us to all live our happy lives without even noticing. But that's the way that we address this in the time frame that we need to, and affordably too. Okay, so Robert,
And
asked,
really quickly, I just
Yeah.
want to remind folks that if you want to, I can unmute you if you wanted to talk out loud, no pressure, but there's a raise hand function that's at the bottom of your screen. You might have to click on the three dots, but just throwing that back out there.
Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, you guys are welcome to talk. I don't mean to speak for you. Robert, you asked, California Energy Smart Homes has an undocumented requirement. Heat pumps must be in the MADBIS database. For some reason, Mitsubishi heat pumps are not currently in the MADBIS database system. I've run into that problem too, and I went to, in that case, Innova, and they're like, oh, yeah, they'll take us a minute, and they got it in. So I think that it's just a database. It's the simplest, easiest thing. You just load up some information into it, and then you're done. So Mitsubishi, someone should be complaining to them and giving them the link to the MADBIS database, just like I did with Innova, so that like this nice architect down in Long Beach could get her heat pump. So yeah, good point. But I think advocacy is the proven way to solve that database issue. And that database is important for a lot of different programs, actually. So it's just generally a good idea to get into it. The anonymous attendee next said, the incentives are nice for people that have the money to pay for a home retrofit, with some percentage covered by incentives and rebates, but it is not going to be sufficient for mandated retrofits. The incentives for the Inflation Reduction Act HERO program I mentioned earlier are so significant that for low-income housing, it could actually pay for about 80%, just those, and I think we can get 100% covered with other incentives. But that's for low-income folks. People who are moderate income are expected to pay more, and people who are high income are expected to pay most, if not all. Some programs have income qualifications I showed you, some don't. So sometimes wealthy people get access to the monies. Lots of studies have shown that wealthy people are not incentivized by rebates, but instead they collect them because it's a way to make money, but it doesn't change their behavior. Lots of studies have shown that. So I personally feel like that's not a great use of money. But I think your point is well made. You know, some people are going to have to pay money to retrofit their home. However, people have to pay money to retrofit their home because that's what it means to own a home. Like when something breaks, it gets replaced. And most things are replaced every 15 years or less. But stoves are frequently replaced every 15 years. So are furnaces, so are water heaters, so are dryers. Everything is every 15 years on average. You know, you can't get a warranty for any of those things for more than 10 years at all. No one offers more than 10 years. So, you know, what we're doing here essentially is saying when you retrofit, it's going to have to be electric. We're going to give you some incentives, but that's different from saying we're shutting off the gas to your house at date certain. And so on that day, you better have gotten the retrofit done. That is what is happening in Zurich, Switzerland, and it is happening in Amsterdam. Some cities around the world have tried to do the legislated approach, and it gets a lot of pushback because no one likes to be pushed around. You know that, and it sounds like the tone of your voice. You're like, I don't like being forced, you know, to a mandated retrofit. And I think it's really up for grabs whether or not this is going to be mandated at some point, the way that coal stoves were mandated to be replaced. You cannot put in a coal stove. And there was a date back in the 60s in which you couldn't have a coal stove. You had to. The same way that wood stoves new ones have been banned and existing ones have been slowly clamped down on because they're just too polluting. Same with coal. There's another example that there used to be a thing called city gas, like Palo Alto ran on city gas until the 30s. And it was oil that was refined into a vaporous-like fluid, like quote unquote natural gas, methane, which is a gas. So it was very similar to that. But it required, when they decided to go to quote unquote natural gas, they had to go to every single house in Palo Alto. And that was true also in Britain. It's true around the country. Any city that installed city gas, quote unquote, had to go to every person's house and give them or work with them to get a gas furnace, water heater, et cetera, that had the ability to burn that gas because they are very different gases and they have different apertures. Or similarly going from natural gas to propane, those are different devices. How they're built are different because the gases are not the same. So there's a lot of historical precedent for what it means when societies go through a fuel switch because they decide the previous fuel is just too dirty and the next alternative is better. And we are going through that again. This is one of many. And it won't even be the last one probably in our lifetimes for all we know, because it happens like every 30 or 40 years. So Brody, you wanted to talk about the SGIP, the Self-Generation Investment Program, has the incentive for heat pump water heaters. And you noted that it's publicly launched through the tech program, which you noted is like retrofitting of people's single family homes program. And Brody, I apologize, but you should probably type in your own answer to this one, because while I've been following that for years, I didn't actually track down what is the SGIP incentive for water heaters. I don't know it. I apologize, I missed that one. And I should have not missed it because I know about it, but I missed it. What is the water heater incentive? What's happening there for everyone else is that since water heaters have stored heat in them, they're getting now incentivized as batteries, thermal batteries. But the idea is that you get like a larger volume of water, and that's a larger battery, or you run the water heater to a hotter temperature, and that's a larger battery with more energy stored. And these strategies can make water heaters function like a 1 kilowatt hour battery, just 1 kilowatt hour tops, but it can do some of that work. So they're starting to put some of the battery incentive towards water heaters. Liz Wright, you asked, can homeowners with that disappeared. Can homeowners with qualifying equipment apply for both Silicon Valley Clean Energy and Bay Ren? Additionally, does the Comfortably California rebate for equipment sales work with Bay Ren as well? I'm not sure. Bay Ren is supposed to manage like sort of the version of PG&E rebates, and Silicon Valley Clean Energy is a different version of PG&E. They both dip from the pool of the CPUC. So while I think you could apply for both of them, I don't think you could get an incentive for the same equipment. I think you'd have to choose one or the other for any given measure. Let's look at that one. Let's see here. Well, the Golden States, that's not Comfortably California, but that's just the PG&E one that is locally around here, right? That's the marketplace where you buy stuff from their website. Sorry, let's go to not PG&E. The Energy Smart Homes, is that what you're talking about? I'm trying to remember, is there a climate? Bay Ren proposed changes. I think you mean Energy Smart Homes. You said Comfortably California, but I don't think, yeah, I don't have that as one of the incentives here. I think them. So anyway, Energy Smart Homes. That's essentially, in your case, it would be PG&E, and they have whole home electrification note there, but Silicon Valley Clean Energy also offers incentives for EVs as an example. So it's compatibility. It can be layered with San Jose Clean Energy. Ooh, so that means it'd also be able to be layered with Silicon Valley Clean Energy. That's good. Okay. So that contradicts what I was saying. I apologize, but I think what's happening here is because although this is PG&E funds, California Energy Smart Homes, I think they're pulling this out of their investors' money or their greenhouse gas money. These are two pools of money that they have that they can pull from that are not controlled by the CPUC. So I think that's what's happening here. So that's the good news, is that Energy Smart Homes can be layered with San Jose Clean Energy is listed there, but also Silicon Valley Clean Energy and Marin Clean Energy and Peninsula Clean Energy and East Bay Community Energy and Sonoma Clean Energy, all which are in the Bay Area. Okay, so that answered that question, I think.
And Sean, just really quickly, there is, I'm not familiar with it, honestly, but there is a program called Comfortably CA. And it looks like it partners with or offers resources and incentives to distributors and manufacturers and retailers for high efficiency HVAC equipment. So that's a new one for me as well.
I'm so sorry. I missed it. I didn't know that one. I never heard of that one. I will have to track it down.
Popping up left and right. I can share a link.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I can't reply to the question because I already clicked answering
Well,
live, but
I do think that it's
see.
worth referring you back to Bay Ren, because I'll say it again, they have the most experienced staff who are there to answer the questions of how to layer things. And I don't know of any other organization that has well-trained staff for that.
And Brody, I see your hand is up. I can unmute you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you if you were in the middle
That's
of
okay.
saying something. Okay.
All right. Hey, thank you. I have a quick question about California smart homes. So say if an ADU just has a tankless hot water heater and everything else is electrified, they electrify that tankless. Do they qualify for the full rebate from Energy Smart Homes?
Is that the only gas load?
Yeah, the only gas load when they built the ADU was a tankless hot water heater. And if they put that to a heat pump hot water heater, will they qualify for the full amount?
Well, okay, so it's a little tricky here because what they're saying is that it has to be whole house, but you have just one thing in the house. Now, to be eligible, they say they must convert all gas appliances and equipment to advanced electric systems. But that's all means, of course, you could have less than 5. You could have 3 gas loads or 2. So as I'm reading this, yeah, you would qualify for the whole building electrification incentive because that's the whole building's gas load. You win.
All right, cool. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Then Jeff Perone, you asked, are there enough qualified installers to get things done now? Are there rates climbing due to a shortage of installers? Rates climbed for the last few years due to COVID, became very expensive. A lot of people lost employees. Like the whole industry shed a whole bunch of skilled construction workers who will never come back. So we're having to just recover from COVID is its own problem. And similarly, well, as a separate thing, inflation of HVAC and domestic hot water systems, all those went up disproportionately because of supply chain issues, and the prices have been dropping also. That's good. So are the rates climbing due to a shortage of installers? Rates are high in the Bay Area due to the incredibly high incomes and the incredibly high costs. Both of those things, such that if I'm in California, where I live in Arcata, costs are half as much. So when I look around at the cost increase in my area, where I'm very familiar with like Humboldt County's situation, I would say that there is not a shortage. What I've seen is there are enough plumbers and there are enough electricians and there are enough HVAC installers to meet current demand in my region. But in the Bay Area, I'll say again, there's other like big influences, the cost of living, the housing crisis that we have, and also the fact that the opportunity to make more money off of wealthy people is real. Contractors are no fools. Like they're trying to make money and they go to wealthy people and they charge them a higher value. And there are so many wealthy people down in the Bay Area that it drives up costs for everybody else who isn't wealthy, because wealthy people can and will pay to be first in line, and contractors will stop even trying to advertise to lower income folks. They'll just work with high income people. All those things have influences, but there isn't a shortage of installers currently. And I know that there's lots of articles about that. I have not seen that to be true. The main problem we have is that people are retiring. So that's true for contractors generally. It's just like California has not invested in contractor training since I was in college. I was one of the last students to take construction classes at Humboldt State, like how to build a house. Like it was a college class and they shut the whole building down and turned it into a computer lab. and didn't train people how to build houses ever since. So I point out there's a lot of complexity, and the Bay Area is its own beast because it is the most expensive place to build and retrofit in the whole nation. More expensive than New York City is the Bay Area. But so far, I've not seen a shortage. But I've seen a lot of people think that there's a shortage. I think there's a lot of people making money off of waving their hands in the air and freaking out about things, because when I actually try to get work done, like an HVAC contractor down in the Bay Area, it's kind of normal. They're like, I'll be there next month. I've got a whole bunch of people stacked up. Give me a month, I'll get there. It might take 2 months. I've seen as long as someone say it's going to take me 6 months. So you could argue that there's a lack, but it still gets done. And of course, if you call someone in crisis, you can always get things done faster. Next anonymous one says, do you have a ballpark cost for installing heat pump HVAC and heat pump water heater systems in a 4-bed, 2-bath, single-family home example that you showed? Yes. So an HVAC system for that house, if I was going from a gas to electric furnace, like a heat pump, I mean to say, for that house, I would put 20 to 25 grand on it because of where you live. If it was up where I live in Arcata, it would be about $12,000 to $15,000 if you got 3 bids just for that heat pump stuff. And then I mentioned it before, if you add completely new ductwork, which has nothing to do with you electrifying it, it's if you decided to replace your ductwork is a different question. But if you did replace your ductwork, that's another 15 to 20 grand of people working up in the attic. So then the heat pump water heaters, those are easier to price. The heat pump water heater costs, if you buy it, about $2,200. And the way things get priced is that they're usually 3 times as expensive as what you buy them for, unless you get a good deal. And then it's maybe twice as expensive. So I've seen heat pump water heaters being installed in the Bay Area for as little as $4,500 and as much as $7,000, $8,000. And in my area of California, that price would be no more than $4,000, and $3,500 is what I see in apartment complexes at scale. Buy it for $2,200, installed for $3,500. Those for apartments. So as you asked, for a single family home, I think you should put $6,000 on your water heater expectations, and you should put a budget of 20 grand on replacing the furnace with a heat pump. And then you get to put these incentives into the mix and try to drive the cost down. And you always need to get 3 bids. The first bid is so frequently a person sees that you have no idea what you're asking for, and they have to teach you what you're even asking for. And they know in your state of ignorance that you might only get 1 bid, and it'll be them, and they'll give you a bid that's 25% more expensive than necessary. Your second person who shows up, you're going to be more informed about what you're asking for, and same with the third person. And you drive down the cost by looking like you're not a chump, and you've done some education, and you've talked to some people, and you get these 3 bids. That's an important process, regardless of whether or not you're electrifying. But if you're doing any significant system in your house, get 3 bids. And try to, if you would like to save money, invest a little bit in your own education. And if you'd like to spend more money, then don't watch any YouTube videos about what it looks like to replace a water heater. Don't read any tutorials on, like, there's so much you could read or watch if you spend 10 minutes, but you make choices about how much you spend. I'm speaking as a person my job was for 6 years to run bids and get 3 to 6 bids on everything. And so I'm very familiar with what this means. Try to get as many bids as you can to drive down costs. An anonymous attendee notes that it's not the cost of the appliances, it's the additional associated costs. Hallelujah, anonymous attendee, you are right. It is the labor costs and the warehouse costs nearby and the cost of getting on the road and having people stuck in traffic for an hour trying to get to your house. And there's just so many costs about the Bay Area that make things different. And then, anonymous, I misread your intent or tone. I apologize. That's so dangerous, isn't it? Anonymous, you said, I am already electrifying my house. I'm just asking questions, because most people that are going to have a retrofit their homes are not wealthy. Yes, yeah, and so I apologize for misreading your tone. I appreciate what you're trying to point out is that the programs that are for lower income folks need to be supported. And we have a housing crisis where we're the 49th worst state out of 50 in terms of people being overcrowded. New York essentially is the worst in New York City. And we have 50% of the nation's homeless population. And we go down a long list of like how California is the poorest state. So yeah, we really, and I do, this is my passion, is I really focus on how to help out low-income folks. And so I appreciate what you're trying to draw attention to. Another anonymous attendee says, there are 1 million or so homes in the San Francisco Bay Area that use gas appliances. You're saying there are enough trained people to do installations to meet the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's mandated dates. Yeah, what they're saying is that in 2027 or 29 or 30, et cetera, as these dates come in, and let's say your water heater breaks in 2027, it was going to break regardless, right? It broke. So now you have no choice but to get a heat pump water heater. All of the plumbers in that area are going to be installing heat pump water heaters, and they are already servicing the replacement rate of like 1 every 15 years, water heaters break. So they're already in the mood of just replacing everything that is retrofitted, and we already have the situation. It's going to take a month and it's going to cost more money because it's the Bay Area. So yeah, I'm saying the retrofits, when things break and everyone who's already exists doing this work goes into electrification because that's the rules. And there's so many incentives to encourage people now to learn how to do it. I mean, they're even paying contractors to go to classes. Silicon Valley Clean Energy paid me to teach a class, and then they paid contractors to take the class so that they could convert over to electrifying. So there's significant effort to try to help out the existing industry so that when there's the replacement because something broke, they know how to do their work, but with the heat pump water heater. And the heat pump water heater has also undergone a significant change this last year, where they came out with a 120 volt one, like it's a blender or a toaster. You can plug it into any outlet in the house, including old outlets, like old 15 amp cord, like a, what are they called? Braided wire cord around it, like the old fashioned stuff, knob and tube, that's what it's called. You can get a heat pump water heater that can run on knob and tube. It only uses 500 watts, which is like a couple old incandescent light bulbs, 3 or 4 incandescent light bulbs, 100-watt bulbs, just what the wires were always designed for, which was knob and tube circuits were designed for incandescent light bulbs and 4 or 5 plus some other things plugged in per circuit. We've all gotten rid of incandescent light bulbs, so our circuits are underloaded, our plug load circuits. So now we can plug in heat pump water heaters. Oh my gosh, I just saw the tiniest lizard outside my window. That was adorable. Okay, back on topic. So the heat pump water heaters have been redesigned so that you don't have to have an electrician show up to get the work done. And similarly, HVAC heat pumps, there are a lot of 120 volt HVAC, like for heating, ventilation, air conditioning. So space heating systems, space cooling systems, a whole bunch of them now are 120 volt to make it so you don't have to have an electrician to coordinate. And if you have air conditioning now, that's a heat pump. It just only works in one direction for cooling. And so you can use the same circuit for, if you have an air conditioner, to put in a reversible air conditioner, which is a heating air conditioner, a heat pump. So yeah, the circuit's already there, don't need an electrician. So yeah, the deal is that the Bay Area Air Quality Management District is not requiring that people replace faster than breaking. So we have an existing industry to replace stuff that's broken. And then anonymous attendee says, example, in the San Francisco Bay Area, my water heater fails on January 1st, 2027. Okay. True, Jeff Prone points out it's best to replace your water heater at the end of its life, not on failure. Failure sucks. That means you have no water for days. But like when it gets old and you can tell that it's old, it might be better to replace it just for your own peace of mind. And because that often happens on Christmas. Everyone starts showering on Christmas. This is true. Plumbers talk about this. It's like, it sucks. Families come home, they overload the water heater. And so frequently people are without hot water around the holidays because that's what happens when you crank up the system and it's creaky and old. But anyway, you wanted to know, anonymous, if it fails in 2027, how long is San Jose going to let me go without hot water as I wait until my electrical panel is replaced and my wiring is done? Well, to answer that, I would not ever recommend that someone replace their panel or their wiring to install a water heater. As I mentioned earlier, back in 2014, when I discovered this was a problem, that 30 amp, 240 volt water heaters couldn't be installed practically in apartments because we couldn't run wire. while people lived in their apartments. Like, we can't evacuate an apartment complex to do that kind of work. So we needed to have water heaters that could just plug into any outlet. In 2016, I got a large research grant with a bunch of other awesome researchers, and we studied how to do it. And then finally, in 2022, the manufacturers, a bunch of them, started coming out with 120-volt heat pump water heaters that literally work better than the electric resistance big backup that had. So that'd be the first thing, is that water heater breaks, go get a 120-volt heat pump water heater and avoid the electric panel upgrade, and you'll probably have a better experience of showering lots of people in a row, because they're designed to be better. Not worse, but better. Then you say, so all this infrastructure retrofit work has to be done in advance of the mandated dates, right? That would be one way of doing it. If you wanted to put in a 240-volt outlet to your dryer, instead of getting a 120-volt heat pump dryer or condensing dryer or electric resistance dryer. But if you wanted a specific high power device for every one of your appliances, as opposed to equally awesome products that are designed to not require service upgrades, wiring upgrades, or panel upgrades, then yes, you should do that in advance, because it takes a bunch of time and money. But I encourage you to come back for the class on how to avoid any wiring retrofits with existing products out there that are just as good, just as cheap, they're designed for these issues. Because what you might not realize is that Europe has been electrifying faster, and they have older buildings, smaller closets, older wiring, less infrastructure. And they've been doing this in advance of us, and they have been developing products that are coming to the American market as we start to engage in heat pump retrofits they're just lower power devices that work. So you go on to say, because who can predict come 2027 when the water heater will fail? And you're right. The only prediction you could have is that it's probably going to be 10 to 15 years. And if you get 20 years out of a water heater, that's awesome. But most people's water heaters fail shortly after the warranty period is up. And that is not an accident. That is how products are designed. They're designed to last their warranty. And if you get more than that, you're lucky. I talk with manufacturers, which is the world as it is. And Jeff, you point out that you've heard that some plumbers have emergency loaner gas water heaters that they will install until you can install a heat pump water heater. And so it's like, seems like this is no longer really necessary. And that's true. Plumbers frequently do have loaners, like a good sized plumbing outfit, not your pickup truck, plumber, but, good companies, they will make sure that they can rush out there and they can replace your water heater. And now that there's 120-volt heat pump water heaters, some of them are stocking that as the replacement water heater. And there's also electric resistance 120-volt water heaters, just like up to 30 gallons. So you could put that in if you didn't have the heat pump water heater right away, but just plug in that 30-gallon tank to any nearby outlet, and now you have a water heater. That's, not your long-term water heater, but 30 gallons is enough. You need about 8 gallons of hot water for a shower. And so that's about 3 showers. And then the water heater heats back up over 15 minutes to an hour, depending. So that's good. An anonymous attendee, you said, thanks for all the information. And you're welcome. Thanks for your questions. I think that these are hard questions. And I've just been devoting a lot of my intellectual energy to trying to solve them. And so I appreciate your curiosity, honestly. Elaine, you said, you're welcome. Thanks for sharing so much practical info and useful recommendations. Looking forward to the webinar and avoiding electrical panel upgrades. Yeah, I'm gonna put extra energy into this. Elaine, if you're coming back and any other anonymous attendees, we're gonna have a good time.
It'll be a fun one. It's on June 19th. And you can, if you haven't registered, you can register on our Climate Smart website.
And Redwood Energy has a YouTube site. If you type in Redwood Energy to YouTube, you'll see that we have, I think, 3 different recordings that we've made over the years. The one that I'm giving you will be new, it'll be beautiful and such, but we've given the presentation before. And so and we just try to get better at it each time, like make clearer slides, make more illustrations. And we, I mean, I've got staff, and we all try to do this together, and there's a couple of volunteers that we work with, and we're all in this to win it. So yeah, come on back, but you can go to Red Energy's YouTube site if you're really curious now. And Anonymous, you point out, the issue with all this is that there's not an aggressive effort to get the information out and inform the public. None of my elected officials even talk about the Bay Area Air Quality Management District mandates. Fair enough. Those mandates have just been coming around this spring. And so I think a lot of folks are not comfortable or familiar enough with the deadlines or the technical issues. And I think the questions you're raising are the right questions, 100%. I'm ready to answer them because other people have asked them before, but they are the right questions. Like, how do we do this? And what are the consequences? And try to say like, well, we are working on having comprehensive solutions. There is a book that we wrote, and Bay Area Air Quality Management District funded the book that you can find on Red Energy's website. It's free. It's how to retrofit homes, and has a lot of details on how to avoid wiring upgrades, service upgrades, panel upgrades. And all the products there, has tons of pricing information that's been taken from like studies of Silicon Valley Clean Energy, SMUD, the PG&E, like a lot of local studies to try to say what do things cost. So there's a book that they've helped write. I think what you're just going to see is that it's 2023, and this deadline actually happens in 2027, in about 4 years. So we're at the very beginning, and there's not a whole lot of information out there on it, truthfully. So it sounds like your job is to learn as much as you can and go teach your politicians, because they're just people. They're not magicians. They never got their doctorate in home electrification. They're just people, probably a realtor, a developer, and a stay-at-home mom or dad, and a couple senior citizens retired who made some money, and they're just people.
Yeah, and just really quickly on the city side, we are definitely trying to figure out our messaging, and we know how important it is to try to get as much information out to as many people as possible. So it's something that we're all thinking about a lot and continue to actively work on.
Anonymous attendee asked, you talked about 120 volt heat pump water heaters. Are there 120 volt heat pump furnaces? Yes. What that furnace, quote unquote, would look like is a ductless mini split. If you're asking, is there a 120 volt that goes to a ducted system? There's not. There are 120 volt air handlers that you can find in that book. So then you'd have a 240 volt line that goes to an outside air conditioner heat pump. And that air conditioner heat pump would then send refrigerant up to the fan coil box that I mentioned. And there are 120 volt versions of that and 240 volt versions of that that are designed for electric resistance backup for old fashioned heat pumps that didn't have computers. So the modern ones are 120 volt because there's no need for electric resistance backup if you have a computer. And, so to say, there's a lot of different 120 volt strategies. You can do wall heat pumps, really fancy ones. They look great. That's really common. You'll see in Europe, and I'm putting them in apartment complexes. My clients are, I advise it. So there's wall mounted ones by Innova. It's also called Efoca, that are beautiful. Maestro, Olympia makes them, the Olympia Maestro. So there's ones that are on the wall that look great. There's ductless mini splits, which is like a small heat pump outside. The compressor will be rectangular and upright and kind of thin. And those are used all over the world. And there's a whole bunch of 120 volt ones, but they can only do 1 ton of heating, and your house probably has 3 tons of heating and cooling demand, maybe 2.5 tons. So you'd put in a few of them, and they'd be on different circuits because you can only have 1 of them per circuit. That work could be done, and it's feasible, and it's not that hard. Like, what circuit is this? There's simple tools that electricians have to figure out if you're sharing circuits, and you can go to the circuit breaker box because they should be labeled. So you put 1 120 volt heat pump per circuit, and you'd have probably 3 of them for your house. So it'd be like a fan coil on the wall that was blowing warm and cold air. You could put them in one in every bedroom as long as you just have them one per circuit. So those are two strategies that are 120 volt, but the ducted system, no. You can't get more than a 1-ton heat pump that's 120 volt. As soon as you get 2 tons or 3 tons, which is a whole house system, that's 240 volt. Jeff Perone, you said, I own a small home in San Francisco, and I'm concerned that it would be a bad financial decision to put too much money into zero carbon upgrades, since the buyer might tear it down or extensively remodel it. Any thoughts on how best to think about this? Yeah, so we've all talked about, there's this phrase called the split incentive, and it's with landlords and tenants, where the landlord's like, I can't raise rents very much to pay for any things I do to this apartment. Even if I'd like to do something nice for the tenants, I can't get it paid for. And that split incentive, where while the owner might want to do it, they don't get incentivized for money to do it. And you see that also when people worry about the next owner, where they say, if I plan for the next owner, this anonymous stranger who could be anybody, but does that next owner hypothetically constrain my choices, the things that I'd like to do in my house? And people think about that when they decide what color to paint the house, or if they want to put in granite countertops or not, like, resale value of the house. People, of course, think about these things. And I don't know who the next owner is going to be. I hope people don't tear down homes, but it does happen. But what are you going to do? On the other hand, if they're going to keep the house or put an addition on it or whatever, then all the things you invested into were good, not only for you, but they were good for the world. And if you sold the house and you said, I want you to pay me for these incentives, you should know that nothing gets paid more than about 60%. Any investment that you put into your house is not valued by the next owner by more than about 60%, and sometimes significantly less. That's how real estate works. So if you are hoping to get 100% of the value out of something or make profit off of it by investing into your house, that's not how houses are valued. They're valued by their neighborhood, by their size, by other amenities than granite countertops, which might help sell the house, but you will not get the money out that you put in. That's just not real estate, unless you got lucky. Or I'm not saying there's an absolute rule, but that's how real estate agents talk about investments in homes. Okay, this will be my last question because my daughter would like to go swimming at the swimming pool. Anonymous attendee, you say, well, the city needs to inform its elected officials first. Yes, the city staff are responsible for educating elected officials. That's how it works. Elected officials should do their own work, but that's what staff are there to help with. Okay, so I totally agree with you. And then I suggest the city needs to kick off sessions like this with a specific mention of the relatively near-term Bay Area Air Quality Management District mandates. These are great ideas. And you want to say, you need to not make it seem like this is a nice thing to do, electrification, but is mandated, at least for water heaters and furnaces. Well, I think that what happens with air pollution is that it disproportionately affects people of color and the poor. And so I do think it's nice to try to electrify people's homes. Like, it's nice to your neighbors, because the air pollution that comes out of your house is air pollution, and it's right there. Like, it's just in the same way, like if you had your car idling in the driveway for 2 hours or 10 hours, just like you might have your gas furnace running for 10 hours. But if you saw someone running their car, you'd say like, well, I don't really see any smoke coming out of the back of it, because car exhaust doesn't look like smoke once the car engine gets hot. But would you ever stick your nose in that? Would you run it into your bedrooms? Like, are you willing to acknowledge that that really is air pollution that you're causing for all your neighbors? And so that's my pushback, is that I think it is nice. I think it's a generous thing to do, even if you're doing it for selfish reasons, because you could put in a solar array on the roof and you could electrify your spacing system, and the cost of heating your house would drop by 1/2 to 3/4. Like, you can make good money, as all my developer clients do, off of electrifying and putting up solar arrays. That's business. But to your point, it is mandated. And many of these elected officials sit on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District board, because that's a board made up of elected officials primarily. And I don't know, I think that people are going to come to these things understandably pissed about being mandated to do anything. This is America, land of the free. But we have mandated that people stop using coal. We've mandated that we stop putting lead into gasoline engines. We've done a lot of things over the years to mandate that we take care of each other better, because if you have asthma, that is one of the most miserable things that happens in your whole life, is you can't breathe. And asthma is caused by gas stoves. Like 12% of the Californian kids and adults that have asthma, it was just their stove. And so like, there's a lot of countervailing issues all going on at once. No one wants to be pushed around. No one likes to be told what to do. No one likes to have their options restricted. No one. And yet we have done it. And America is also a place of democratic governance. We as communities decide through democratic elections what we're going to do. And we sometimes force things, because that's also part of governance and democracy. So anyway, I welcome you, because I know that it's frustrating. And I think that there'll be people who speak to that. Oh, and Anonymous says, hey, let me add to the previous comment. It is nice. Thank you. I appreciate you agree. It is nice to electrify, but the mandates provide the sense of urgency. Yeah. Yeah. One way or another, it is urgent. And people could feel like it's too soon or it's too late. But 2027 is coming around the corner pretty fast. So we need to talk with each other about this and plan. And I'll tell you, man, there are tons and tons of meetings and such going on. And you're welcome. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for participating. It's cool to get to engage you, you know. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. And again, feel free to sign up. We have 3 more webinars, continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Don, thank you so much. You have been awesome. And thank you for going a little over time to answer questions.
Love it.
Really, really great.
It was a pleasure. All right, I'm going to go
Made it.
take a swim. You guys
Yeah,
have a great
go
day.
enjoy the Hawaiian weather.